He told me I was insecure because I didn't want him sleeping at another woman's place. He said I didn't understand trust. Then 3 days later, he sent me a photo, shirtless, lying in her bed. The caption said, "Some people trust. Some don't." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just smiled because he'd just given me permission to run my own experiment on trust. 3 weeks ago, my boyfriend Evan came home acting like he had just been cast as the hero in a movie no one asked to watch. He had that calm, righteous glow that only appears when someone's about to make a terrible decision and call it the right thing. He dropped his bag, sighed, and said, "Clara's in trouble." His best friend. The one who used to text him memes at midnight and accidentally call when we were out together. He said her roommate had suddenly moved out, leaving her with rent she couldn't cover. I nodded, offering the usual sympathy. "That sucks. She'll find someone new soon," but he shook his head. "Not that easy. Rent's due in 4 days. He paused then, like he wanted to look brave when he said it. "I'm thinking of moving in with her. Just for a while. Until she finds a new roommate," I laughed. It was instinctive, the kind of laugh that breaks through disbelief. "You're kidding." He didn't laugh back. "I'm serious. She needs help." The silence that followed was sharp enough to taste. My heart didn't race. It just sank a little because I realized he believed this story he was telling himself, that being the savior made him untouchable. I told him calmly, "That makes me uncomfortable." His tone shifted instantly. The warmth drained, replaced by that quiet, disappointed voice manipulators use when they think they're teaching you something. "You're being selfish," he said. "If you trusted me, this wouldn't bother you." That line hit like static in my ears. Not because it was cruel, but because it was practiced. "It's not about trust," I said. "It's about respect." He smiled, slow, condescending, the kind of smile professors give when you give the wrong answer in class. "Boundaries are just fear disguised as maturity," he said, like he was quoting a podcast. "Real love is freedom." I should have argued more, but I didn't. I just stood there, watching him polish his moral armor, and realized the fight wasn't about Clara at all. It was about control. He didn't want my trust. He wanted my surrender. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his tone, his words, the way he turned logic into guilt. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe healthy couples didn't set limits. Maybe real trust meant swallowing discomfort in silence. But somewhere beneath that self-doubt, something colder whispered, "This isn't love. This is a test." 2 nights later, the test arrived. My phone buzzed at 12:14 a.m. A message from Evan. No words, just a photo. He was lying shirtless in Clara's bed. The caption read, "Some people trust, some don't." For a full minute, I didn't move. The world shrank to that one glowing image. My stomach didn't twist. My eyes didn't sting. I just stared at it, and something inside me went perfectly, beautifully still. He thought he was proving a point. He was just not the one he imagined. Because at that exact moment, something shifted. I stopped being the subject of his test. I became the one conducting it. 3 days after the photo, Evan texted me, "Dinner tonight? Need to talk." No apology, no explanation. Just that confident tone that assumes I'd say yes. I agreed. Not because I wanted closure, but because I wanted to see what kind of story he'd tell himself next. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. Dim lights, soft jazz, the kind of place people choose when they want to sound mature while doing something cowardly. He showed up freshly shaven, wearing that clean conscience on his face like a designer suit. When he saw me, he smiled, not out of warmth but relief. Relief that I was still playing the part of the calm, reasonable girlfriend. He started before the menus closed. "I've been reflecting," he said, voice low and deliberate. "I think our conflict showed me something about us, about how differently we handle trust. You react emotionally, I try to act with reason." His words were polished, each one placed carefully like stones in a garden. I let him speak. He continued, "Boundaries can sometimes be walls. Fear disguised as control. I don't want to live that way." He leaned forward, eyes soft with that fake wisdom manipulators love to weaponize. "I've decided to move in with Clara anyway. I can't let insecurity stand in the way of doing what's right." I stared at him, expressionless. "So my comfort means nothing?" He smiled gently. "That's not what I said." "Then what did you say, Evan?" I said I can't let fear control us. Us? I asked. You mean me? He blinked, thrown for a moment, then regrouped. This is about growth. You can't hold me back from helping someone. I wanted to laugh. Growth. That's what he called it. The slow erosion of my boundaries in the name of moral evolution. If I moved in with a male friend, would you call that growth too? I asked. He chuckled like it was cute that I even asked. That's different. I trust you. The irony nearly made me smile. He didn't realize how naked his hypocrisy sounded, how transparent the double standard was when spoken aloud. The waiter came with our drinks. Evan thanked him with perfect manners, then turned back to me as if he'd just delivered a TED Talk on emotional intelligence. I watched him talk about freedom in relationships, about overcoming attachment wounds, about how love without ownership is the highest form. It was almost impressive, the way he built his moral tower on top of my discomfort, every sentence a brick of justification, every look a reminder that he thought he was better than me. I realized then, he wasn't trying to convince me. He was trying to hear himself say it out loud, to make the story sound noble enough that he could live with it. He wanted to be the enlightened boyfriend, the progressive thinker, the man unshackled by petty emotions. And maybe he was convincing himself. But while he talked, something in me unhooked. I stopped defending myself. I stopped trying to make him see. I just watched him, calmly, clinically, as he built the very narrative I'd later use to destroy him. When the check came, he insisted on paying, like generosity could cover arrogance. Outside, the air was cool and still. He buttoned his coat, smiled faintly, and said, "You'll see. I'm doing the right thing." His tone was gentle, paternal, like he was teaching me about life. I smiled back, slow and polite. Maybe we both are. He walked away first, proud of himself for ending things maturely. He didn't look back. He didn't notice how quiet I'd become, not out of hurt, but out of calculation. Because every word he'd said that night, every justification, every smug lesson about trust and freedom, they weren't wounds anymore. They were data points. He thought he'd written the final act. He hadn't realized I'd just started writing mine. People like Evan expect noise. They crave reaction, anger, tears, arguments, anything that confirms their importance. Silence, though, is a mirror they can't stand to face. So I gave him that. Not the silence of avoidance, but the surgical kind. The kind that cuts deeper the longer it lingers. The first few days were easy. He sent small, casual texts, busy day packing. "Clara says hi." I didn't answer. He double texted. "You're quiet." I still didn't answer. On the third day, he called. I answered on the second ring. "You've been distant," he said, trying to sound calm, but failing to hide the crack under his voice. "Are we okay?" "You tell me," I said softly. He sighed, relieved I hadn't hung up. "Look, I just need you to trust me." "I do," I said. "I'm learning." Then I hung up. That night, I met Noah, an old friend Evan had never liked. We hadn't spoken in months, but when he texted to ask how I'd been, I said yes to coffee. I needed to talk to someone who didn't make words sound like traps. We laughed about old times, and for the first time in weeks, my smile felt real. I took a photo of the table, 2 cups, a candle, nothing incriminating, and posted it to my story. No tags. Within minutes, Evan viewed it. 15 minutes later, "Who's that?" I didn't answer. An hour after that, a call. "A friend," I said when I finally picked up. "Like Clara." The silence on his end was heavy, almost tangible. I could hear the way his breath caught, the way he tried to swallow his own medicine. "Don't do that," he said quietly. "Do what?" "Be petty." "I'm not. I'm learning trust, remember?" Then I ended the call. Over the next week, my silence became a rhythm. Every time he reached out, I delayed my replies, sometimes by hours, sometimes not at all. Every response was clean, minimal, logical. No emotion for him to feed on. Without reaction, he began to spiral. His texts grew inconsistent, affectionate one day, defensive the next. He wanted to provoke a fight, but I gave him nothing. Instead, I posted little fragments of life. A wine glass, a sunset, a quote about boundaries. Harmless things that made him guess. By midweek, the guessing had turned into obsession. He started showing up in my DMs from burner accounts, subtle, pathetic. Then Clara messaged me herself. A long paragraph that started with, "I think you're hurting Evan," and ended with, "He deserves someone who believes in him." The irony almost made me laugh. I forwarded it to Evan with a single line, "You should tell your friend to stop managing your relationship." He called immediately. I declined. Twice. The silence between us grew into something physical. You could feel it in the pauses, in the read receipts, in the way he started sending long confessions disguised as rational essays. "I just wish you'd communicate like an adult." "I'm doing my best here. Why are you punishing me for being honest?" It was fascinating watching him unravel. The man who once preached about trust and maturity, now pacing inside his own insecurity. No one noticed it too. "You're playing chess," he said one night. "He's still playing checkers," I smiled. "Not playing. Just observing." Because that was the truth. I wasn't taking revenge, not yet. I was collecting data. I was studying how his confidence corroded without validation, how his ego starved when no one was watching. Every unanswered text was an experiment. Every silence, a hypothesis proven right. By Sunday, he was desperate. "We need to talk," one message read. "Then please, I think I messed up." I didn't reply. I wanted him to sit in that realization, the one place he'd never been comfortable. Uncertainty. He'd spent months lecturing me on trust, using the word like a leash. But now, stripped of control, he was learning what trust actually feels like. The ache of not knowing, the void of not being answered. And I felt nothing but calm. The kind of calm that comes when you stop reacting and start observing. When you realize silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Because the truth is, he'd built his power on my noise. Without it, he had none. A week later, near midnight, my phone lit up again. Evan. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice sounded different, thinner, slower, stripped of the self-assurance that used to fill every pause. "Clara's been acting weird," he said. "She's jealous, controlling. She went through my phone, got angry about messages that weren't even about her. I don't know what happened. She's not who I thought she was." I leaned back against the headboard, listening to the faint sound of his breathing on the line. "And how does that make you feel?" I asked. He hesitated, then said softly, "I just want things to go back to how they were." There was a tremor in his voice. That quiet collapse people try to hide when their own logic turns against them. "Before what, Evan?" I said. "Before the photo? Before you called me selfish for having boundaries?" Silence. Then a single word, small and almost human again. "I'm sorry. Apologies are funny. To some people, they're a way out. To others, they're currency, a trade they offer in hopes of buying forgiveness." But to me, his words sounded like static. Not because I hated him, but because I no longer felt anything at all. "I'm not angry," I said calmly. "I'm just done trusting you." He tried to speak, but the line broke. Not the signal, but his composure. There was a pause, a long one, filled with the quiet realization that I wasn't the same person he'd been testing. I didn't need to yell or prove anything. The game was over, and I'd won simply by stepping out of it. The next morning, I poured a glass of wine beside a boarding pass, snapped a photo, and posted it with no caption. Within minutes, he saw it. 10 minutes later, a text, "Where are you going?" I typed slowly. Somewhere people don't confuse manipulation with trust. Then I blocked him, that was it. No dramatic closure, no screaming confrontation, no revenge monologue. Just silence again, but this time it was mine. Weeks passed. Clara started posting vague quotes about betrayal and learning to let go. Evan deleted his profile picture, then his account. Mutual friends whispered about how things didn't work out. I never asked for details. Some stories don't need sequels. One night, months later, I found that old photo again, the one he sent me from her bed. I looked at it for exactly 5 seconds before deleting it. No bitterness, no sting. Just data erased. For the first time, it felt like peace. Because here's the thing about tests. The person who thinks they're the examiner rarely is. Evan wanted to measure my trust. He never realized he was the subject of the experiment all along. He was so focused on proving he couldn't be doubted that he never noticed he'd already lost respect. In every experiment, there's a control variable, something constant that defines the results. In ours, that was me. My silence, my restraint, my logic. He thought power came from noise, from moral speeches and emotional manipulation. But real power, it's quiet. It's the hand that stops reacting while the other one keeps swinging at ghosts. I don't hate him. I don't wish him pain. I just know he taught me something valuable. That love without self-respect isn't love, it's servitude. And that the moment someone tests your trust, they've already failed their own. So when people ask me why I didn't scream, why I didn't expose him or get revenge, I tell them the truth. I didn't need to. Because sometimes the sharpest justice isn't delivered in anger, it's handed down in silence. And in this story, the man who thought he held the knife was the one being dissected all along.